In this video, I will give a brief introduction to CHON, a software tool that facilitates the exploration of a new kind of LFO control signal that I am calling a CHO. CHON stands for Coupled Harmonic Oscillator Network. It is built on the idea of generating musical material from a computer simulation of a real physical system. The system in question is that of coupled harmonic oscillators. A system of this kind is formed by connecting two or more oscillating nodes via a spring-like force such that they exert a force on one another. I was first inspired to create CHON when I saw two pendulums connected by springs oscillating in such a way that the two pendulums appeared to be, in a sense, passing an oscillation back and forth. This is a fairly common demonstration for physics classrooms showing the superposition of two modes of oscillation in a system. But the appearance of an exchange of energy back and forth was what captivated me. I imagined sounds forcing each other into activity and contrapuntal structures in which sounds, instruments, and textures passed musical energy from one to another in a cascade of antiphony. In order to experiment with this kind of musical structure, I began working on CHON. The physics of CHON are simple. They are governed by the classical mechanics we all learn in high school. Only Newton's laws of motion and Hooke's law of springs are needed to understand the basics of the system. Let's look at the case of the simple harmonic oscillator. A simple harmonic oscillator can be represented by a mass or particle on a spring. There is a point of equilibrium for this mass where it will remain unless it is perturbed. If the mass is moved away from equilibrium, it will exert a force proportional to the displacement. If it is then released, it will move back toward equilibrium, pass it, and continue to oscillate at a fixed sinusoidal frequency. This sinusoidal oscillation already resembles a tool used very commonly in electronic music, the LFO, low frequency oscillator. An LFO is a control signal that continuously modulates a sound parameter. Many composers of electronic music will have dozens of independent LFOs controlling various parameters in their digital audio workstation. One way to think of CHON is as a group of LFOs that are not independent. Instead, they push and pull on one another, creating a physical connection between modulating parameters. If we add another mass and affix each of them to a spring connected to an unmoving anchor and also connect the masses to each other via a third spring, we now have a basic coupled harmonic oscillator system. With this simple system, there are two frequencies of oscillation that can occur. These are called the modes of the system. The first mode can be seen when the two particles are in phase or moving in the same direction at the same time. Here we can see that the two particles are not exerting any force on one another. Their movement is synchronized, driven by the external springs. The second mode can be seen when the two particles are 180 degrees out of phase, moving in opposition to one another. Of course, many other patterns of motion can arise depending on the phase relationship of the particles in oscillation, but all of these are actually a superposition of the two modes. It is in this state of superposition that we see the exchange of energy characteristic of the coupled pendulum system that inspired CHON. CHON was designed to allow the user to interact with the particle system as directly and intuitively as possible. The user can interact directly with the particles by clicking them and dragging. CHON's visual interface is dominated by the particle simulation in the center of the screen. The spheres on screen are analogous to the masses in a mass spring system. The particles were given different colors to differentiate them and to allow them to be mapped to the displacement graph. The displacement graph is located above the particle's simulation on the screen. In the graph, there is a line for each particle that is mapped to the same color as the particle it represents. The graph shows the displacement of each particle from its equilibrium position in a particular axis. The user may choose which axis is graphed using the graphical user interface. The sonification you hear in these examples comes from the internal sound engine of CHON. CHON provides two modes of sonification with its additive synthesizer and its bell synthesizer. The additive synthesizer assigns a harmonic to each particle, and that harmonic can be frequency modulated or amplitude modulated based on the particle's movement. Here is an example of the frequency modulation function, where the width of the frequency modulation of each particle is increased as its displacement increases. And here we have an example of the amplitude modulation of each particle according to its displacement. In addition to providing these continuous control signals, CHON can also trigger a sound when particles cross their point of equilibrium or resting position. CHON has the ability to simulate a network of up to 100 particles. As the number of particles increases, the system approaches a simulation of a string. This is the basis for the well-known mass spring method of physical modeling synthesis. CHON bears a superficial resemblance to these methods, but their goals differ. Physical modeling synthesis utilizes the mass spring method to simulate the displacement of a string in order to generate a realistic string sound. CHON uses a mass spring system to simulate the coupled particles and generate control data from each individual particle. The behavior of each individual mass is the central focus in CHON. It is important to note that, rather than an innovation in physical modeling synthesis, I consider CHON to be an innovation in the traditional LFO model. Another difference is that, in a string simulation, typically each mass moves only transversely, meaning perpendicular to the length of the string. The particles of CHON, however, can move in up to 3 dimensions. Aside from string-like structures, CHON can also simulate a membrane like a drumhead. If the spring force and damping force is weak enough, the particles can also erupt into a cloud. The displacement of each particle on each axis is reported separately, so one can map the axes to different sound parameters. CHON contains a basic synthesis engine, but the real power of CHON is that every particle broadcasts its displacement via Open Sound Control, OSC. Most digital audio workstations can accept OSC data, so CHON can control parameters in Logic, Ableton, or Reaper, for example. CHON can also drive a software synthesizer like Reactor or VCV Rack, a programming language like Pure Data, MaxMSP, or Super Collider, or a physical synthesizer such as a Eurorack setup with an OSC input module. Using these control signals, a composer can replace the LFOs in their work with physically plausible and cohesive signal networks. Under certain configurations, CHON can also generate highly complex results that strain this physically plausible and cohesive perception. CHON can also be used to write instrumental music. In summer of 2020, Hocket, an LA-based piano duo, put out a call for very short compositions of 1 minute or less. I took the opportunity to make a first attempt at composing a piece of music using CHON. The result is the 45-second miniature piece called Pandemonium. I set up a 4-particle system in CHON and sent the OSC output to an algorithmic music composition tool called SCAMP, created by Mark Evanstein. I set up SCAMP to interpret the OSC data as the contour of a unique arpeggio for each hand. Each of the 4 particles dictated the movement of one hand of the performers, so that the movement of the performer's hands to the right and left of the keyboard would reflect the movement of the particles from right to left in CHON. I decided that the entire piece would be one single gesture. I set CHON into motion and configured the damping effect so that the particles would come to rest after about 1 minute. The result is like a sonic explosion that gradually dissipates while each arpeggio pushes and pulls on one another. CHON is a tool for exploring CHO signals. CHO control has the potential to add a new physicality to generative and algorithmic art, but it can also be integrated more subtly into any kind of art. It can breathe new life into parameters which would otherwise have been controlled by a simple wave or envelope, and it can add cohesion between parameters which would have otherwise been independent. In developing CHON and experimenting with it, I have begun to realize my vision of energetic sonic objects pushing and pulling on one another. I will continue to explore this new musical territory and to develop CHON further. I hope that others will join me in this exploration. CHON is free, open source, and easy to find and download at this web address.